Hey, it's Bob Pulver. In this episode, I'm joined by Markellos Diorinos, co-founder and CEO of Bryq, a hiring intelligence and talent assessment platform. We dive into the world of data-driven decision-making in hiring, exploring how talent intelligence can revolutionize the way companies match individuals to roles. Markellos shares insights on mitigating AI biases, the importance of third-party audits, and the challenges of regulating AI in different regions. Markellos is a fellow responsible AI advocate and joins me from his home in Athens, Greece, so he has a great perspective on this space. We also discuss the concept of AIQ and how it's becoming increasingly important in today's AI-driven workplaces. Hope you enjoyed the discussion, and thanks for tuning in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver. With me today is Markellos Diorinos. How you doing, Markellos?
I'm doing great, Bob. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. Markellos, why don't you give our listeners a quick little bio about yourself and your background?
I'm going to be very happy to. I started my formal education. I think that's where people kind of start to formulate who they are and what they want to do in life. As a computer scientist, a long, long time ago. That was, let's put it eloquently, in the previous millennium. And I enjoyed it very much because I like to solve problems. But as I started working as a computer scientist, developer, software architect, and all that stuff, I came to the harsh realization that the hard part about software projects wasn't actually coding it or solving it. It was getting people to use things. That was very, very interesting. So over time, that actually made me to drift away and go over to the dark side, if you prefer, or the business side, as we like to say more colloquially.
Oh, I thought you had that backwards.
No. And, I spent a bunch of years working for places like Microsoft. I had the pleasure of doing product management for Internet Explorer way back in the day of IE7. And nowadays, I don't know if a lot of people know what IE used to be anymore. So you're telling them about IE7, they're like, what was that? Was it like your Spectrum or something?
I know our kids would not have no idea what that is.
And frankly, having been the product manager for Internet Explorer Server, I loved it to death. It was excellent at the time. Nowadays, it's kind of fine that people don't know about it. There are bigger and better things for people to work with.
Sure.
But as I was doing that at Microsoft, I started getting to the concept of big data. And then my next occupation ended up being I spent over 10 years working with telco operators. And everything we did at telcos was en masse. It was like, okay, I have here 50 million subscribers and I need to give them better experience or, sell them, upsell them, cross-sell them, whatever. And that really manifested for me the mindset of big data. What I learned during that time working there was that I have a lot of personal bias and I'm usually wrong. And what I mean by that is not that I'm wrong all the time, but if I'm looking at the solution and I'm judging it and saying, we have three variants, this is probably going to be the one that wins. A lot of times my personal bias doesn't translate well to another 50 million people. But the data always tells me the truth. So that was enlightening and a bit sobering experience to realize that, you think you know a lot of things and then you realize that, what I actually know is how to ask the right questions and interpret the data. I shouldn't be making so many gut decisions because I'm biased myself and I'm not always right. And that was the first step into what later became Bryq, because with two of my co-founders, one of them has a psych background and the other one has a tech background, and he has a real tech background. He actually does tech stuff, not like me, where I'm a fake tech nowadays. And we were hiring people, and not every hire was a success. And one of these days, we're sitting together and we're doing a retrospect on a specific person. We're saying everything we asked in the interview, we got the right answers. Everything looked so great. Everything looked so good. How could we have prevented that hire? How could we have recognized early on that this person was both wrong for the role and really, really wrong for the company DNA? So he really didn't align with what we wanted to do. And one of the co-founders jumped and said, look, there's a whole body of science that does that. Let's go and see what IO psychology tools are out there. And we're like, oh yeah, we'll never make a wrong hire again. And we went and looked at the tools, and what we realized was that there's a whole great body of science that tells about how you should select people and what's important and what to do and what not to do. That gives out a ton of data. And then you need a small army of people to interpret that data, because it comes very raw and it tells you that this person's like this and like that. But really, should I hire? Should I not hire? What do I need today? These were questions that were ill answered. And also, by the way, a lot of the experience when you're doing those psychometrics, it literally felt like punching cards on the computer. It was so antiquated, the user interface, the assessments that we saw and everything. And that's where we realized that there's a huge opportunity in finding psychometrics, getting big data about what the company cares about. So not having psychometrics in a vacuum, they don't exist for themselves. But how do these psychometrics or other data that we have, by the way, psychometrics was just the starting point, hard skills, whatever have you. How do they relate to business outcomes? Is it performance? Is it tenure? Is it going to be the ability to learn new things? Whatever it is that I need. And we set out to create a platform, and this is what we did with Bryq, that actually masters that. It ingests all the data from people. It ingests all the data about performance or other business outcomes, and it comes back and offers practical solutions that says, hey, here's what works today. Here's what you need to do to achieve that outcome, and so on and so forth. It sounds simple, and indeed it is, but simple solutions tend to also be very powerful, and sometimes simple solutions can also be revolutionary.
Fascinating. One of the things that comes immediately to mind is the amount of attention and focus and investment on matching job descriptions to resumes. And you've got two sort of faulty, two-dimensional, objects that you're trying to match up, but to what end? I mean, to your point, it may sound like a simple approach, but it seems much more logical when we think about quality of hire and metrics that matter. People that are going to come and they're going to, achieve some semblance of the potential that you tried to anticipate, and you're going to be able to retain them and keep them engaged and things like that. Like, it just seems like much more logical to invest in, Bryq and those types of solutions than to spin your wheels trying to find a better match on paper.
The reality is that ideally, yes, you would do away with resumes completely. But I love a great solution. I also love a solution that people can apply with today's environment, right? So
Yeah.
the way I like to think about people, and I love this analogy because it's so telling, is that people are like icebergs. There's a tiny part that you see that's above the water surface. And that's usually their knowledge, their experience, sometimes a bit of their skills, to the extent that this can be, depicted in a resume. And the thing about their knowledge and skills is that this stuff is necessary to do the job, but it's not sufficient. If you're looking for an accountant, the fact that I know accounting doesn't mean that this is enough for me to do the job. And by the way, this is the stuff that's easiest to be taught. And that's important because we live in a world where the half-life of skills is rapidly diminishing. It used to be 5 years. Now people are saying, oh, it's probably around 2.5 years. So no matter who you hire, you'll end up having to train them. So that stuff that we typically use for selection, which is, the A to Z of selection, it's not that helpful. And then there's all this other part of the person, everything that's below the waterline. And you're going to find there, their attitude, their personality traits, their growth mindset, how they're thinking about it, the potential, their ability to learn new things. And these are the things, the exact things that are going to determine how successful they're going to be in the future. There are tons of studies that say that, the biggest correlation between what we can measure and success in the future job is actually those things. And more importantly, these are the things that are most difficult to change. Everyone, including myself, I've done a lot of work on myself over the years, right? And I've only managed to change that part under the water, only tiny changes. I've learned how to camouflage, and maybe show different things on top. But really, I've never loved rules. I still hate rules. I'm just now wise enough to know when to conform to it, but I'm never going to be enamored. And whenever you're going to put me in a position where I have to strictly follow rules, I'm going to have a hard time dealing with that. So once you start thinking about that and you're saying, hey, what do I want to hire? Do I want to hire that tiny piece and where a lot of people look alike because everyone's the same and, they all know, I don't know, Java or Python or everybody has done a bit of AI? Or do I care about these icebergs? And, some of them are small, some of them are big, some of them are agile, some of them are huge. Depending on what I'm looking for, there is a very big difference that's you really can't tell. So thinking that way is a great way to start thinking about hiring. And yes, the resume is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. Hopefully, there's going to be some better alternative yet. As everybody's trying their hand at having a blockchain about skills. It's an interesting concept.
What does it really take to lead with impact in today's ever-evolving world? Welcome to Inside the C-Suite, the podcast where influence, energy, innovation, and empathy converge. Hi, I'm Christy Honeycutt, your host. Join me as I sit down with the boldest voices in leadership, visionaries who are not just making decisions, but making a difference. In every episode, we explore the heart of leadership. How do high-performing leaders harness their energy? How do they lead with empathy without losing their edge? How do they turn disruption into innovation and pressure into purpose? You'll hear unfiltered stories of adversity, resilience, and the raw moments that shaped true influence. This isn't about perfection. It's about presence, passion, and the energetic exchange that fuels transformation. Inside the C-Suite is your invitation to lead from a deeper place with intention, connection, and courage. If you're ready to go beyond the surface and unlock what really moves leaders to action, hit subscribe and step inside. You can find us wherever you get your podcast fix. Inside the C-Suite, well, we're an energetic exchange. Let's lead with influence, live with energy, and create with empathy.
But until that happens, sure, it's going to be a factor of making hiring decisions. And this kind of drives to why the heck do we have talent intelligence? Because we don't want to just make decisions based on a couple of data points that you can put in a piece of paper. I want to amass all the information I get about the person. Yes, I want to know about their skills. Yes, I want to know about their aspirations. Yes, I want to know about their psychometrics and who they are now. And the more data I have about them, the better are my chances of making sure that I match them to the right gig, role, occupation, career, all these things. It's kind of the reason why there are career counselors at school, right? They have a certain function. And we've been very negligent in providing the same function for employees.
Well, certainly there's use cases for this on the candidate side and the pre-hire side, as well as post-hire, just from a talent management perspective. I mean, I also think this is valuable. I'm not saying that all psychometric assessments are necessarily equal, but it does seem like if these are attributes that don't necessarily change, it would make sense to have that as part of your portable credentials, whatever you plan to do, right? It could be applying for a job. It could be applying to graduate school. It could be, I don't know. It just seems like, again, as long as you have full control over who accesses that information and you assume that you agreed with it and that's how it wound up there, that would make the application process in the future a lot easier. I mean, you could assess for all of those true, human skills, which at the end of the day, like you said, as technical skills, the half-life shrinks and AI continues to take on more, a sort of upskill itself in a way.
Oh, I wish there was a silver bullet. What's really interesting that you're saying is because we're working now with a major university, and we're working them both ways. The first part is, hey, people come in and they start their studies, and we want to give them some directional advice. It's not so much study to become an accountant, but it's like, look, here are your areas of interest that are going to match your personality. Here are things that you're going to enjoy doing over the next couple of years. And by the way, these are potential, occupations that come out of that. It's not banding. It's not necessarily a one-to-one. And, I'm going to pick, I want to become a dentist. But it's more like, you know what? I enjoy interacting with people. And I'm more of, if you've ever done Holland's career occupational theory, it's really great. It's like some archetypes, and it doesn't necessarily describe everyone and everything, but it kind of gives you a rough idea of where you want to be. And that's great. And you do that when you enter, the school, and you spend a couple of years learning about these things. And by the time you get out, no matter what you've studied, now is the time where you're saying, hey, okay, I have these skills. This is the person I am. What are the kind of things I can do now? And then you match them to the job market available. And I think that over time, we're going to be seeing more and more people thinking that way. Let's help people on both ends, right? Let's give them the right direction, what they need to study. And let's make sure that when they get out, they also get matched to the right kind of thing. Because I can study to become an architect, and I can be an architect, or I can run an architectural office. Those are both occupations that seem the same, but nothing alike. And, I can become a teacher for architecture because I love architecture, but I hate practicing it and I love teaching about it. These are the kind of things that sound simple in principle, but once you start and saying, hey, look, the data says that you're an architect, you've done it, you love your school, you're going to hate being an architect. And you know what they say, right? If you can't do something, teach about it. But it's a very viable career choice. I think we're going to get into an age where career choices are going to be more informed, and people, therefore, are going to be way more successful.
I think you can give that guidance after age 16. I think people would be a lot happier, in high school. So my daughter will be a junior in high school next year, and she'll start looking at colleges and taking SATs and things like that. And she'll start thinking about where she wants to go and what her major might be or whatever. And if your school policy is do your own work, right? So the antithesis of, embracing AI for good, right? As a tutor, as a coach, not cheat. Like the jobs that might be appealing to them now, and why they want to go to a certain school or go into a certain program, you don't know what the longevity of that career path really is. I mean, already we have kids spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a higher education and majoring in things that have no, short-term ROI to, recoup that cost, right? And so I know we can't plan too far ahead because we never know how things are going to evolve, but we can sort of plot multiple sort of trajectories of where AI, might go and the kind of capabilities that it may take on, such that, unless you're the absolute best at doing that, most of those roles will be done by digital labor in some way.
You raise a very interesting point, and we expect AI to fix all sorts of broken processes. But a lot of times when I talk about AI, I find that the introduction of AI these days is very analogous to the introduction of computers in the first place. We used to have computers. When do you think they got introduced commercially? People always think that the IBM PC was kind of like the widespread computer. That was, late 70s, early 80s, where the modern PC era got generated. And guess what? We had exactly the same reactions. Oh, we're going to take away their jobs. No one's going to be able to find a job now. Computers are going to do everything. And then it was like, okay, we can take everything and automate it. And what we did in that process, and this is how we learned, is that we took a lot of broken processes, things that didn't work in the first place. We computerized them, and guess what? They remained broken. Now it was just that they were breaking faster, or you were getting the wrong results faster. And the same thing applies with AI. It's not going to solve problems by itself. You have to know how to solve the problem. You have to know the data. You can, of course, get tremendous insight, much like computers allowed us to look at bigger sets of data and do data processing in ways we didn't imagine before. AI allows us to do the same thing. But if I just take AI and feed it the data that I have today, especially in the hiring area, if I take an AI and say, hey, look at all my hiring decisions. These are the good ones, these are the bad ones, replicate those. It's going to do a fantastic job in replicating them, which means that it's going to replicate all the bias. It's going to replicate all the inequalities. And I have yet to meet a company where I can say that every hiring decision has been a good one. Everything that's substandard in today's companies and the bad way that we have about managing performance and all those things, they're going to be replicated to perfection. So that's not the right way to do it. We should always take a step back and say, okay, now I have a tool that's way more powerful than before. And this tool now is a computer. No, this now is an AI. How am I going to solve these problems? Let's not just apply things to the existing processes. Let's take a step back and think about how do we engineer the process? Is this the optimal process? What should it look like? And we've done this in a couple of places with AI. And a lot of times when we're using a bunch of LLMs in our current implementations, and we're never letting the LLM do everything. Because once you do that, then the LLM makes all sorts of shortcuts and inferences and whatnot that have no way of knowing. But the LLM is great and fantastic in understanding text and extracting meaning and doing all those things. And if you give it piecemeal, and then you do it piece by piece, and you can control what moves from one place to the other, it's the best tool we've had in years. I mean, we're churning out software like never before, with a better quality than ever before, with a lower cost than ever before. That's AI.
I do think probably the most appropriate analog to this era, going back to some of the points you made at the beginning, I think just really understanding how you can derive insights from that data and using AI to sort of augment our own human intellect and capabilities in terms of extrapolating insight from information. I mean, I'd like to see us move more to the augmentation rather than automation, in the sense that I think that that's where a lot more value will be realized. And as we're talking about hiring and talent acquisition, it's about making better decisions. So as long as you have a good foundation in quality data, and you've assessed that data for, you said, potential human bias in that historical data, at least you know that, and you can then course correct, and you can try to mitigate bias going forward. But to just absorb historical information and then just use that at scale, you're just perpetuating that historical bias that has existed. And unfortunately, we've seen headlines that talk about that exact scenario. So I guess one of the things that you and I have talked about before is, like, as you train these models, when you're looking at candidate application or an employee record, how do you make sure that you are looking at it in such a way, like, how do we make sure that those biases are in fact mitigated? And I know, Bryq has gone through an independent audit to check for, adverse impact, before you delivered it to customers. But I wonder, like, what happens when your client gets it and they say, well, okay, this is awesome. Can we now have it trained additionally on, our proprietary management data or whatever other, data they have in their HR systems? But how do you think about that? How do you talk to your customers about maintaining, that audit posture?
Whether you're a payroll pro or an employee wanting to understand your paycheck better, we've got you covered. Tune into It's About Payroll for expert insights on payroll trends and compliance, or check out It's About Your Paycheck, the go-to podcast for employees looking to understand their pay and rights. 2 great shows, 2 great hosts. Listen now, brought to you by Work Defined, where payroll meets clarity.
The BARF. Breaking news, acquisitions, research, funding. It's the week that was. It's a wonderful way to catch up on the week that was the week prior, kind of a John Oliver-esque type of show. Ryan and I pitch each other's stories. We laugh. It's fun. You can watch it on YouTube, but you can also subscribe to the podcast. Give it a listen. Give it a look. Thanks.
Whew, there's a lot to unpack into this statement. So where do I begin? A very good question. Thank you for asking. Let's look at a couple of different levels. Let's use hiring as an example, though what we're going to discuss actually applies to a whole bunch of different areas. You talked about the New York City law. When we first saw it, we said, oh, why does this even exist? This is superfluous. EEOC has been saying, here's the 4/5 rule. You have to abide by it since probably sometime in the 1970s, right there around Title VII and whatnot.
Yep.
And then we thought about it a bit and we said, no, it's always been very cumbersome for people to actually abide by the 4/5 rule or even have proper reporting. Now, with technology, we shouldn't actually relax and say, look, we've been doing a half-assed job manually. Let's continue doing a half-assed job with AI. No, AI is actually an opportunity to become a better version of ourselves. And yes, the New York City law makes sense because, as I say, you're using a system that crunches data like there's no tomorrow. Take a moment and make sure that when you're crunching this data, you don't have anything that kind of breaks your system and introduces bias. And anybody who's written software that's more than 2 lines knows that you can introduce a lot of bias. Design errors, thinking errors, actual coding errors, data errors. There are a million ways where things go wrong. So having a third party, that's part of the nice thing because people are always policing, but saying, hey, you're playing with people's career. Let's have a third party. And there are a bunch of people who can do this. And you're one of those where you say, hey, we love Bryq. It's great. Now, Bob, look at the data and make sure that it actually does what it says. Let's make sure that we're doing right by candidates and by employees whenever we make an employee decision. This is slightly utopic. And it's not going to start working from day one. It's going to be a long, long time before these things actually get traction. People start using them all the time. But it's definitely a step in the right direction because that's what you want to see. Whether you're an employer, an employee, a candidate, or anywhere in between, you want to know that you're going to go to a system and the system is going to judge you on merit, equitable, and it's going to be not going to be impacted by how old you are, where you were born, all those things. So I love it. It's painful. And that's what happens with change, right? All of a sudden you have new technology and we're barely coming to terms with what we're doing and how this thing's working. And then all of a sudden you have legislation. And I know very few people who love legislation. And I'm definitely not one of them. Even though in principle I am agreeing. I think that it's the right thing to do. Do I experience the pain? Yes. Does it slow the pace of innovation? Yes. Does it also make sure that, think about a pharma industry without any controls, without clinical trials. I don't want to live in that world. Why do we think that hiring decisions are that much lesser than that? So yes, striking the right balance between responsible, using AI in ways that people understand, making sure that there are third-party audits that hold us all accountable. And I don't know if you've seen the EU AI Act. It's a whole new chapter of regulation, legislation, and commitments. It's a lot. It's not unreasonable. And that's the challenge. There's a part of me that says, I want to go ahead and innovate, and I'll do it responsibly. But how can I guarantee that everybody's going to do it responsibly? So maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's a playing field, an even playing field for everybody, making sure that, yes, we all do AI, but yes, we're not negligent in what we have to do, in dotting our I's and crossing our T's and making sure that we do things right. Well, that was my short answer. Do you now want the long answer?
I've read sort of the highlights of the EU AI Act. It's certainly very different than the legislation that exists in New York City, but I can see that some states in the U.S. are already sort of taking cues from the EU AI Act. And frankly, I mean, if you're a global organization or you have ambitions to be one, you've kind of got to pay attention to the EU AI Act, not because you have aspirations to enter European markets, but because that's probably going to be one of the sort of benchmarks in terms of legislation that other people are going to continue to sort of align themselves with from a risk standpoint and from a liability standpoint in terms of who's responsible. Other areas may not have the same penalties, and they may not have necessarily like a GDPR type of data privacy pre-existing legislation, where this EU AI Act has to sort of be a layer on top of that. But I still think if you can comply with the EU AI Act, you can probably comply with most other legislation as it propagates around the world. So we'll see how people do against that. But I do think data privacy is important. Maybe that plays into the the blockchain business case, where individuals have more control over their career, their professional data. But I think people, at least here in the U.S., people are still trying to get their arms around that. And I think to your point, from New York City standpoint, it's not the most enforceable piece of legislation. So companies aren't exactly beating down my door to get audited.
Look, you know how these legislations are. People are ignoring them until the first couple of instances of enforcement come to light.
Yeah.
And then everybody rushes to fix them. Is it the right thing to do? Yes. Is it the best measure? No. But I don't know what the best measure would be at this point in time. It's a new game, right? Both companies and legislation, they're trying to catch up with realities. So it's interesting times.
We'll see what the U.S. federal government does, because I know they've been having meetings and they've set up committees or whatever, but we know that in itself doesn't mean that action is being taken. But I think everyone needs to stay on their toes and take a human-centric approach to all this. We're talking about people's livelihoods, and I do think these things are important. When it comes to innovation, I mean, I think some of the legislation is a little bit misguided in terms of where they're trying to put some of the restrictions in the AI field in general. I'm a fan of open source in general, and in this case, I think the open source models are more transparent, but they can also cost companies a lot more money if they need to build things themselves. The cost of compute and resources is still pretty high, but I'm more a proponent of legislating at the application level or the use case level than I am about trying to control only these upper echelon of LLM providers setting rules based on the amount of compute that they're using, or these metrics that won't apply to 99.5% of companies on the planet.
I don't know about you, but I don't know very many people that are hopeful about the world of work. And I'd like to change that. My name's Marcus Mossberger, and I started the Hope at Work podcast, where you'll find two things. Number one, really interesting guests. And number two, innovative ideas about the future of work. Check it out.
We've always seen two schools of regulation, and I think the US and the EU are quite the two poles into this equation. The US always tries to regulate with controls. Think about Sarbanes-Oxley. You have to do this and check that, blah, 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 and so on, and measure this and measure that. And New York City, show me your bias, and it's fine. And the EU, being more the liberal-minded Europeans that they always like to regulate almost by intent. Here are the things that you should do, and here's how you should be structured. You shouldn't do this. But GDPR has been around now for, must be almost a decade, and there's still now is emerging an ISO standard that's corollary to GDPR, but there's never been a GDPR certification. And that's one way to regulate, right? Saying, hey, here are the things that you should do, and if I find you not doing those things, There are going to be penalties to pay, but you don't have to prove all the time that you're doing them. But you have to comply them because it's the law. Or the other thing, which is show me the controls, and if you find a way to bypass the whatever it is that I meant, but your controls still look fine, it's kind of okay. Frankly, you need a bit of both, and there are no good solutions. And legislation has historically been very slow to catch up with new technologies. These days, technology is slow to catch up with AI. So I think of myself a fairly technical-minded person, having a background in computer science and all that stuff. And on occasion, I am overwhelmed. I'm like, I'm not sure how that works. Or what's the implication of that? Where does my data actually go from here? I have questions.
So when you look at the broader space in terms of generative AI, outside of talent acquisition, outside of HR and talent completely, are there tools that you see that either scare you or think this is fantastic, whether that's work related or in your personal life?
I'm excited, and I don't tend to be scared. I see a lot of wonderful opportunities. Look, like any tool, you can use a hammer to build things. You can use a hammer to smash your head. It's never the hammer's fault, right? If I start smashing on my head, it would be stupid, and why would you do it? But sometimes it's not as clear or not as painful immediately. So I'll talk first about an example from our place. Whenever we've been doing talent intelligence, there's always the need to have a full system, a taxonomy or an ontology, whatever you call it, with all the hard skills. You have to know this, and it's like computer science, and then there is programming, and then there's languages and so on. And by the time you've built this, you've spent like 6 months, you've cataloged everything, and you put the final dot, and you're saying, oh, look at what we've done. Now this is all outdated because it's been 6 months that we've been doing this, and there are like 5 new skills here and 10 there, and those things are obsolete. And that was really hard to master. Nowadays, with the help of LLMs, we've built systems that are dealing with skills, and they don't need a firm taxonomy. They kind of rearrange themselves, and they know from context, and they can compare skills without them needing to be, 1.2.17 or whatever the ONET codes are, which, by the way, are still a very useful input. But you're getting this level of flexibility where we're starting to become better at handling slightly more ambiguous data. Translation is one of the areas where we've seen huge leap and bounds. Every time I go into a call with a customer, a partner, one of my colleagues, I get a fantastic transcript out of it, which is great, voice recognition, and then I get an even better summary that captures the essence of what I've said. That would be a note taker 6 months ago. I'm not even going to talk about years. So all sorts of astonishing things are happening, and people are complaining because they're saying, oh, you know what? These mundane tasks that we're doing, they're now no longer paid that well. And that's a downside. People are seeing their livelihood threatened. At the same time, the same people are now saying, hey, you know what? I could do this in a year. Now I can do it in 4 months because I no longer have to do all these mundane tasks. And I have the systems that can do it for me. And, we have people generating content, and content writers are very concerned because, the AI is going to generate all the content. It can refine a lot of it, but you still need to generate some original thoughts. And I have yet to see the LLM that's going to generate very original content. So all I'm saying is that it's going to be give and take. Some things are going to get worse. Some things are going to go away. Many new things are going to come up. And that's the exciting part, because I think we've been doing things subpar for ages. And I'm in the field of HR. So if I look back at HR, we're doing things pretty much the same way that we were doing it 400 years ago, because there wasn't a clear, actionable, better way to do them. Now AI gives us better ways to do things. And that's going to happen in any number of fields. And that's going to be disruptive. I like to be a techno-optimist and say that that's going to be overall a positive thing.
I'm definitely in your camp on that. But I think people need to accept that this is a significant change, that this is a transformation that is broader and more complex, but also perhaps has the most sort of net positive for them individually, for their team, and hopefully for their organization. But yes, you've got to adopt these tools that you talked about at the beginning about adoption. I mean, I think that's getting people to actually use some of these tools and be comfortable, interacting with these tools. I think is critically important, and to be able to do so responsibly. The average person is right now, an early adopter or user of these tools, but as we know, you can now create your own GPTs and your own agents and your own co-pilots now. So we're all builders as well. When I think about how we sort of upskill everyone, regardless of role or seniority, it's easy to look around, read the headlines, and think this is overwhelming. I'm not sure I can, handle all this, or I'm not sure, how many days till I retire? Like, do I need do I need to go through this? But I think, like you said, like it's just like learning how to use a computer. We don't stop using a computer when you retire. I mean, my parents are in their early 80s. They're as attached to their devices as me or even my daughter, I think. So this is a life, adjustment, I think, that people need to get comfortable with, but they can't just offload everything to AI. They still need to think critically about how they're using it, as well as, what the output is. I mean, it's still not a doctor, so be smart about the types of questions that you're asking it, but also understand that it's not giving you a definitive and 100% accurate answer. And so I think that's part of what people need to go into.
To go back to my hammer analogy, everybody gets a brand new set of AI hammers. How they're going to use them is up to them.
That, of course, brings me to the one question I ask all my guests, Markellos, which is, when you see the phrase elevate your AIQ, what comes to mind?
I thought about it for a bit, and you know, I've spent the past decade or so negative, or maybe even a bit further up, in psychometrics, and I'm still no psychometrician by far. But the IQ, I like to think of the IQ not so much as a measure of how clever one is, but as a measure of cognitive ability. How can people handle specific tasks? And when you're talking about AIQ, what immediately jumps to my mind is, how can people handle their IQ? What's their ability to, how can people handle their AI? What's their ability to deal with AI? If I have a high AIQ, and that's my very liberal interpretation of your question now, I understand that it's a fantastic tool. I'm going to use it to validate things. I'm going to use it to help me unstuck when I'm stuck. I'm going to take a lot of tedious work. I was filling the other day some compliance questionnaire. Yes, I love the fact that I can have AI help me with that. Give me the answers and I just review them. I still don't trust the AI to write the answers for me. I would never give out any compliance questionnaire or anything else for that matters that's just been done by an AI. So does it take 80% of the workload for me? Hell yeah. Can I use the right tool in the right place and in the right mode? That's your AI. Is it easy to get? I think it's challenging. But hey, we can all work on it.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. No, I love it. I love your take. Markellos, as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for spending some time with me and with our audience. I think there's a lot of takeaways from this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Bob. You know that this is one of my favorite subjects, and I'm sorry we didn't have more time. I'd love to expand on any number of items. And it's really interesting. Every time I talk about AI, even in this conversation, I learn something new. And it helps me think again about the same items over and over and become a little bit better and a little bit. You know what? I think I've raised my AI to a bit today.
Hey, that's the soundbite right there. Thank you, Markellos. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. That wraps up another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
I get it. The podcast just isn't enough. That's all right. Head over to your favorite social app, search up Work Defined, WRK Defined, and connect with us.